Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson's
private jet
involves an undercover FBI investigation.
They opened Michael Jackson's private jet, and what they found inside stunned everyone. This airplane carried the King of Pop through one of his most intense tours. For years, rumors swirled about what secrets the aircraft might hold: hidden rooms, mysterious belongings, or even clues to the man behind the music. But when the doors finally swung open, the truth was far from what anyone expected. What lay inside tells a story not of luxury, but of something far more revealing about Michael's life on the road. Let's dive in. A jet fit for the king. When Michael Jackson stepped onto his Boeing 727 during the Dangerous World Tour, the jet represented mobility, security, and control in the middle of global chaos. The aircraft wasn't purchased outright. It was chartered, reportedly through a private aviation company, to serve as his personal travel base while moving across continents for a tour that spanned over a year. The Boeing 727 is a narrow-body tri-jet aircraft that can cruise at 570 miles per hour with a range of roughly 2,500 miles. It measures about 150 feet in length with a wingspan of nearly 110 feet. Designed originally for short to medium-haul flights, this jet was popular among VIPs, business executives, and touring artists because of its size and ability to land at smaller airports. In Michael's case, the 727 made sense. It was large enough to carry him, his team, and selected essentials, but nimble enough to fit into tight travel schedules and handle last-minute changes. But you see, Michael's decision to charter a 727 rather than a more luxurious or customized aircraft had more to do with function than style. This was during the early 1990s, a time when he was under constant pressure from the media, fans, and business commitments. The Dangerous Tour was a massive production involving stops in Europe, Asia, South America, and beyond. Traveling efficiently and securely was essential. The aircraft was set up with a standard VIP configuration, which likely included recliner seats, a private lounge area, and possibly a bedroom module. However, it wasn't decked out like a flying palace. Sources who worked on the tour have said the interior was more practical than flashy. Michael reportedly didn't spend time partying on the jet. Instead, it was mostly quiet. He'd travel with close staff, medical professionals, and security. Sometimes his personal chef would be on board, but meals were usually kept simple, especially on short flights. There are confirmed records of the jet landing in major tour locations, including Bucharest, Tokyo, and Buenos Aires. In one instance, the aircraft arrived 2 hours behind schedule in Argentina, prompting local media to speculate about possible delays or technical issues. But those close to the operation said the delay was tied to last-minute changes to hotel security arrangements, not the plane itself. When the aircraft landed, it did so discreetly. There was no branding, no fanfare, and often at night or in the early morning hours. Michael's team kept everything tightly controlled. Even airport staff weren't always sure who was on board until after the aircraft taxied in. The 727 was considered secure enough to avoid the need for constant switching between charter companies. This allowed the crew to remain consistent, which was important given Michael's need for privacy and stability. He was a global icon, but during air travel, he wanted to disappear from the public eye. The 727 made that possible. It's also worth noting that during this era, Michael was more focused on managing the physical toll of performing than creating a spectacle in the air. The jet wasn't filled with gold-plated fixtures or exotic decor. From what insiders have said, the atmosphere on board was professional and low-key. He'd rest, read scripts, go over show notes, and sometimes sleep between tour stops. In rare cases, he'd listen to demo tracks through headphones, but the aircraft itself didn't have a built-in studio setup. For Michael, the Boeing 727 was a tool. It helped him maintain distance from the press, avoid disruptions, and move seamlessly across borders. The jet became part of the background, doing its job without drawing attention. And yet, it carried one of the most recognizable human beings on the planet from one sold-out stadium to the next, silently, efficiently, and always under the radar. Tour logistics. The Dangerous World Tour was a logistical operation unlike anything seen before. Each stop required a carefully timed movement of people, equipment, and supplies across thousands of miles. While Michael flew on his own Boeing 727, the rest of the tour traveled by cargo planes, trucks, and chartered support flights. This wasn't a small band on the road. This was a global production with over 100 tour personnel and more than 100 tons of stage gear. The production used Boeing 747 cargo aircraft to transport essential equipment like lighting rigs, soundboards, stage scaffolding, backup power systems, and wardrobe cases. Each setup included modular staging that could be assembled and disassembled quickly. The full stage took up over 20,000 square feet and required dozens of local workers at each venue just to help unload and prepare the site before the tour crew even began building. The sound towers alone could reach up to 60 feet high and needed industrial cranes for positioning. Tour trucks moved between cities in regions where flying wasn't efficient. In the US and parts of Europe, convoys of 18-wheelers were standard. These trucks carried cables, speaker cabinets, fog machines, pyrotechnic gear, and backup gear for nearly every piece of equipment. Some trucks were dedicated just to hauling the wardrobe department, which included multiple identical stage outfits and backups for every dancer and performer on stage. Michael wasn't involved in the technical side of these moves, but he approved most of the key hires. The lighting director, sound engineers, and production managers were people he trusted. They rehearsed for weeks before the tour started, making sure everything from spotlight timing to stage lifts ran without flaw. Rehearsals were not just for the performance, they were also connected to logistics. Teams practiced how fast they could tear down the set and load it into trucks. In some cities, they had to clear stadiums in under 6 hours to avoid fines or penalties from local authorities. A separate catering unit traveled with the team and served over 200 meals per day. This included food for crew, dancers, local workers, and occasionally VIP guests. Menus had to meet local health codes in every country while also respecting Michael's strict dietary needs. Most days, the catering crew set up in large tents near the stadiums, with mobile refrigeration and prep trailers brought in on separate trucks. Every city had different challenges. In parts of South America and Eastern Europe, power grids weren't stable enough for the tour's needs. So the crew brought portable generators, sometimes flown in ahead of time on separate flights. These diesel units could produce enough electricity to power a small neighborhood and were used to keep soundboards, lights, and even parts of the cooling system running through the show. Security was another moving piece. Local police, hired security firms, and Michael's own protection team coordinated at each location. Tour stops were mapped out weeks in advance, with blueprints of stadium exits, emergency routes, and crowd flow patterns analyzed before the crew even arrived. No detail was left to chance. All of this was managed on the move. Tour managers used printed schedules, walkie-talkies, and fax machines to keep things running before smartphones and GPS were standard. Hotel arrangements, transportation bookings, venue permits, and weather monitoring were handled by a team of professionals operating around the clock. Michael didn't see most of this happening, but it's what made each performance possible. The Boeing 727 got him there. But what followed behind was a rolling city, dedicated to building and tearing down a concert that looked the same, whether it was in Tokyo, Munich, or Rio de Janeiro. Without that machinery in the background, the Dangerous Tour wouldn't have been possible. What we know. As you might imagine, very few people ever got a look inside the Boeing 727 that carried Michael Jackson during his Dangerous World Tour. It was a leased aircraft, often referred to as a flying hotel room, but only a small circle of crew and inner staff ever saw what was behind the cabin doors. The design and layout were never formally revealed to the public, and no official photographs of the interior were published. Still, based on reports from tour insiders and aviation staff who worked around the aircraft, we can build a clear picture of what the inside likely looked like. The jet wasn't customized from scratch, the way some billionaires do with their private planes. Michael didn't own it, and it wasn't permanently converted for personal use. It was a modified commercial aircraft set up for VIP transport. Reports from staff suggest that the interior featured a mix of first-class leather seating and private compartments. The seating was reduced from the original commercial layout to make room for sleeping areas, a small galley, and a private bathroom. The space was designed for comfort and efficiency, not luxury. When Michael entered the plane, he typically used a private rear entrance away from the airport terminals. The front of the aircraft was reserved for the cockpit crew and flight staff. The midsection had a short corridor with recliner seats, a work table, and a secure storage cabinet. One of the compartments had blackout curtains, where he would rest or sleep. That section had a single bed, not a full suite, and was lined with dark paneling for privacy. The entertainment system was simple by today's standards. There was a small monitor mounted to the wall in the rest area, and a portable audio setup brought on board by the staff. Michael listened to demo tracks on headphones and sometimes watched VHS tapes during longer flights. The jet had no satellite television, internet, or full media center. Reports say he brought books, scripts, and sometimes tour notes onto the flight. He didn't socialize much during flights and preferred silence or low music. According to tour insiders, the most important feature of the aircraft wasn't the furniture or layout, it was the atmosphere. The flight crew was briefed to keep noise to a minimum and avoid unnecessary interaction. Michael's security team would do a sweep before every departure. On some routes, medical staff were present on board. A small travel kit with medical supplies was kept in one of the overhead compartments, though there's no evidence of any emergency use during flights on that tour. Food service was handled by a dedicated flight attendant, trained to follow his dietary preferences. Michael avoided processed sugar and red meat, and meals often included fruits, vegetables, baked chicken, and herbal tea. The galley was stocked with basic appliances, a microwave, a hot water unit, and a compact fridge. Meals were served on trays with reusable utensils, and dishes were cleaned after every flight by support staff, not airport handlers. One lesser-known fact is that Michael never flew the aircraft himself, though rumors circulated about him showing interest in the cockpit. A former pilot said he once asked technical questions about how the 727 handled turbulence and fuel loads. During takeoff and landing, he usually stayed in the rear of the aircraft, sometimes lying down with noise-canceling headphones. In turbulence, the crew said he remained calm and rarely showed signs of distress. His team ensured he was briefed on flight times, durations, and conditions, but he didn't get involved in the navigation or planning. Security on board was tight. A member of Michael's personal security detail was always present during flights, sitting within 1 or 2 rows of him. Sometimes, 2 guards rotated shifts on longer routes. There were no firearms on board, but security procedures were strict. Identification checks were done before boarding, and in some airports, the team requested private tarmac access to avoid terminal crowds. Nothing about the aircraft was accidental. From the moment Michael boarded until the doors closed behind him, the jet was treated like a moving extension of his personal space. It was quiet, protected, and isolated. Every person who stepped inside had a reason to be there and followed strict protocols. There were no surprises, no passengers of convenience, and no media ever gained access. While most fans imagined the jet to be extravagant, filled with gold fixtures and high-end finishes, the truth was far more restrained. The inside of that Boeing 727 was built around routine, rest, and control, 3 things Michael rarely had while on the ground. Opening the doors. For years, the Boeing 727 that carried Michael Jackson during the Dangerous World Tour sat in storage, forgotten by most people, marked only by aviation logs and maintenance paperwork. It was a leased jet, not a part of any permanent museum collection, and after the tour ended, it was returned to civilian use. But that changed when a group of aviation preservationists acquired the aircraft years later. According to those familiar with the recovery process, the goal was simple: inspect the plane, document any remaining interior fittings, and see what, if anything, had been left behind. Finally, they opened Michael Jackson's private jet, and what they found will leave you speechless. The moment the main door was opened, it was clear that this wasn't just another retired 727. Although some of the custom features had been removed over the years, replaced by standard commercial fittings, the actual footage shows that there were still pieces that suggested a very different past. In one of the forward storage compartments, a laminated schedule was discovered, listing multiple flight legs from Tokyo to Seoul to Taipei, each labeled with initials and dates that matched Michael's 1993 itinerary. Further back, inside an overhead bin that had long been sealed shut, crews found a small flight bag. Inside were a pair of sunglasses, a handwritten note in black marker with names of tour stops, and a set of noise-canceling headphones with worn earpads. Technicians who handled the items said the bag likely belonged to a member of Michael's team, but the personal nature of the contents raised questions. The handwriting was never officially authenticated, but insiders who saw the note claimed it looked similar to Michael's block-style lettering used in rehearsal notes. Another discovery was made in the aft galley. Wedged behind a broken panel near the cabin floor was a rolled-up folder of printed documents, carbon copies of tour paperwork, including a weather report for a Buenos Aires flight and a meal service checklist with the name Jackson handwritten at the top. While there was nothing scandalous or hidden in these pages, the find was still remarkable. It offered a rare physical connection to the tour's operations, preserved by accident, not intention. The most unexpected item came from a maintenance hatch near the rear of the aircraft. A technician working on floor paneling noticed a small, discolored envelope stuck under the insulation. It contained a set of photos, likely printed from 35mm film, showing a cockpit view, crew smiling in front of the plane, and one blurry photo of Michael, head down, walking toward the stairs at night. The images weren't staged or meant for publicity. They were quick snapshots, possibly taken by a flight attendant or ground crew member. Their origin remains unclear, but no one has stepped forward to claim them. What shocked people the most wasn't the contents themselves. It was the sheer normality of everything. No vault, no hidden messages, no mysterious objects. The jet had served exactly the purpose it was designed for: safe, fast transport of a high-profile passenger during one of the most complex tours ever staged. Those who helped open the plane said the moment was surreal. For years, fans speculated about what Michael's travel life looked like. And when the doors finally swung open, they were met not with glamour, but with fragments of real life, practical items, forgotten notes, and the remains of a demanding tour schedule. It reminded everyone that even global superstars need a place to sit, sleep, and recover between the chaos. In the end, the jet wasn't hiding secrets, it was holding memories, context, and clarity. When people think of Michael Jackson's travel arrangements during the Dangerous World Tour, there's a tendency to imagine excess: gold-trimmed cabins, private chefs, luxury lounges in the sky. But the real significance of that Boeing 727, and what has been confirmed by those who worked around it, lies in what it reveals about how Michael approached his work. It wasn't about indulgence. It was all about stability, routine, and protecting himself from a world that never stopped watching. Michael was at the peak of his global fame during this period. Every city he entered drew crowds, often in the thousands, just hoping to see him step out of a car or wave from a hotel balcony. For someone under constant public and media pressure, the 727 became more than transportation. It was the only place where he could disappear, even for a few hours. And that context shifts the way the jet should be understood. Insiders from the tour have said repeatedly that Michael was more concerned about timing and privacy than decor. He didn't request marble countertops or custom chandeliers on board. What he cared about was having a space where he could breathe, away from security risks and screaming fans. The Boeing 727 offered that. It wasn't the largest or flashiest jet available at the time, but it was reliable and adaptable. It could take off quickly, land at smaller airports, and be reconfigured internally without needing months in a hangar. That practicality extended to the team around him. The people who traveled with Michael weren't chosen for luxury. They were chosen for trust, discipline, and their ability to keep things running smoothly. That included flight attendants trained in discretion, medical staff who understood his routine, and a crew that knew how to keep things moving with minimal friction. Many of them stayed with him for years. That consistency mattered to Michael, who didn't respond well to last-minute changes or unfamiliar environments. There were also deeper reasons for maintaining a low-profile travel setup. In the early 1990s, Michael was already dealing with growing legal pressure and tabloid scrutiny. His movements were monitored, sometimes even tracked by journalists trying to intercept him at airports or hotel lobbies. A jet that looked modest and unmarked was safer. It drew less attention and allowed his team to reroute, reschedule, or land under the radar if needed. This was part of a larger strategy. Create a world within a world, where the public persona could be paused temporarily. Medical concerns also played a role in how the aircraft was used. Michael had chronic back pain and required rest between performances, especially after back-to-back shows. According to those close to him, he sometimes had muscle therapy or light treatment administered mid-flight. The cabin needed to be quiet, clean, and consistent in temperature. Flying in a jet with constant personnel changes or public exposure wasn't viable. The 727 gave him a predictable environment where those needs could be managed safely. Then there's the matter of mental space. For someone who performed in front of tens of thousands of people every night, the hours between cities were some of the only times Michael was not being recorded, followed, or analyzed. The aircraft allowed for quiet reflection. He could revise choreography, read, or just be alone without interruption. There was no entourage taking selfies, no journalists asking questions. It was structured stillness, and that was rare for him. The idea that there were no major secrets hidden on board doesn't make the plane unimportant. It makes it more human. It reframes the way we talk about Michael, not as a myth, but as a working artist managing a life that had almost no off switch. The jet wasn't a fantasy, it was a shelter. Not from fans, but from the cost of being famous every waking hour. What the 727 reveals, ultimately, is not how glamorous his life was, but how controlled it needed to be. Every decision, what jet to lease, who flew with him, how the interior was set up, was made to protect something more fragile than money or image. It was made to protect the one thing Michael didn't have enough of: peace. Understanding that gives new weight to the aircraft's role in his life. It wasn't just part of the tour, it was part of the system that allowed the tour to happen at all. Fans, media, and legacy. The discovery of the Boeing 727 used by Michael Jackson during the Dangerous World Tour sparked reactions across fan communities and media outlets alike. When the plane's interior was finally documented, the findings sparked a shift in how people viewed Michael's life on the road. Rather than tales of extravagance, what emerged was a story rooted in discipline, routine, and an effort to maintain normalcy amid chaos. Fans expressed relief that there were no hidden treasures or conspiracies on board. Online forums and fan groups debated the findings, with many noting that the modesty of the jet's interior fit with what they knew of Michael's personality during this period. Rather than luxury, it was about creating a safe space. Some fans shared stories of how Michael's team worked tirelessly to keep his life protected, far from the public eye. Media coverage was measured. Aviation experts explained the role of the Boeing 727 in tour logistics, highlighting its efficiency for artists who needed reliable transport between international stops. Commentators pointed out that the plane's size and configuration allowed for quicker turnaround times at airports, essential for keeping tight schedules. The jet was not unique to Michael, but represented a class of aircraft favored by entertainers and executives alike. Journalists also emphasized the contrast between public perception and reality. While Michael's image was often larger than life, the jet symbolized the practical side of his career. It reminded people that behind every sold-out show was an enormous amount of planning and coordination. The jet was part of a moving puzzle that connected dozens of cities, hundreds of crew members, and thousands of fans. Some in the media reflected on how the jet underscored Michael's focus on privacy and control. Security experts noted that traveling in a leased, nondescript aircraft allowed for discretion. This was particularly important in a time when Michael faced intense media scrutiny and legal challenges. The Boeing 727, in this sense, became a tool to manage risk as much as a mode of transportation. For historians and music industry analysts, the plane added context to a critical era in Michael's career. The Dangerous Tour was his first major world tour after several years of relative silence. The jet's role illustrated how the infrastructure behind his performances had to adapt to new demands, from technical challenges to personal safety. It also reflected shifts in touring culture, where efficiency and security increasingly took precedence. Finally, the legacy of that Boeing 727 extends beyond its physical form. It symbolizes the balance Michael sought between his public persona and private life. The jet's quiet interiors and functional setup is basically a metaphor for the man who could electrify stadiums by night, but needed solitude to recharge. The plane reminds us that beneath the superstar was a person navigating constant pressure. In the end, opening the doors of that jet didn't reveal secret treasures. It revealed a story of endurance, logistics, and the struggle for control in an uncontrollable world. Michael Jackson's Boeing 727 remains a piece of history, not because of what it held, but because of what it represents. The untold realities behind the spectacle. What do you think about what was found in Michael's private jet? Let us know in the comments.